We are live. Welcome back to Consultivation. And this week I have Eric Swick from Swick Business Strategies. Hello, Eric.
Good morning. It's good to be here. Sorry I had to leave early last week, but glad to be back.
Did you have a successful meeting?
Yes, I did actually. I did. So it was time well spent.
Well, firstly, congratulations on that. And secondly, well done on doing this also as part of your way of going to the meeting. I'm not sure. We're going to bring in Kevin, who's our president of the RLCLA and VP, for those of you that already know in the show, of RLC Consult, our advisory training program in the States. Kevin, it sounds like that's a pretty good way of self-preparation, isn't it? Getting yourself ready by doing this show on the way to a meeting.
I think it is, and the topic of this show I've been using in my coaching a lot in the last month. So it's very timely, and this is a great prep.
So, Kevin, at the same time, Eric, what's been coming up in those conversations?
Well, to me, everyone accepting the inevitability of the pandemic, winding down probably quicker than people think. Although I am of advanced years, I have had both of my vaccinations, and I know a lot of people who are in the same boat. And with Johnson & Johnson coming on stream in the US and other countries with a single shot, I think you're going to all of a sudden see a lot of opening up of the economy and businesses to go with it. And I do think that companies and leaders need to seriously think about what they're going to do post-pandemic. Is it back to business as usual, or are things going to change?
That's a great question. What do you think, Eric?
I think it's inevitable that there's going to be changes. I think there was a lot of learnings during this period of time on how we can communicate, how we can meet with people, where it's more efficient. I just think about myself, getting in the car and having to drive 2 hours to meet with a client versus I can devote that time to them while I'm on the video call with them. So it just depends on how you want to use that time. I'm not saying that I would never meet with a person, live anymore. That will happen. We will get back to that. But I think it's going to be a combination of it. I think there's going to be, we have to look at what makes the most sense. But I don't think that you don't just jump back into what you were doing before. I think, or that you continue doing what you've been doing during COVID. I think there's some planning that's needed to figure out what you want to do. And I personally believe you're going to see a lot of hybrids.
I've captured what you were saying there, and I think we should move into that hybrid area, because if I think about conversations we have together and separately across the CPA industry, which if you're watching or listening for the first time, is why we started Consultivations in the first place, to bring our advisors together and friends in the industry in the US together to talk about what's going on from a consultant perspective, and as Kevin made us tell you a couple of weeks ago, have great conversation doing so. Now, with that in mind, I want to talk about this working environment, which is classically the office or working remote. The question that I think, you said here, Eric, there's an inevitability there'll be changes. I think the working environment, like most industries, we're focusing on the CPA space right now. I think there needs to be a change in thinking going into the future. What do you guys think?
I mean, I think there needs to be a change in thinking. I think there also needs to be a change in how you manage and how you lead. I think there's going to be changes there too.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think there will be variations by sector. For example, in accounting, where historically there has been quite a high emphasis on direct management to make sure things are accurate and things are being checked off for the client in terms of tax prep and accounting work, that would suggest that there may be more of an emphasis of working from the office rather than at home, compared to some other industries where a dispersed model is probably much easier to do. In media and things like that, where you can work from home and just report in on a project basis. But it'll be interesting to see how it goes. And I do think and I'm quite passionate about this, that the employees should be engaged in this. Find out what they think, rather than these new solutions, hybrid or otherwise, being imposed. I think this is a brilliant time for a heightened employee engagement process to be enacted by leadership.
I think it's a great message, Kevin, because the answer is no longer just a directive, is it? It's a conversation.
Yeah. To Kevin's point, though, I do think there's industries where they're not going to have that option, right? They're not going to be able to stay at home. I work with a lot of restaurant owners, and obviously retail type establishments. They're going to have people come back to work. It's just a matter of how's that going to be different? How's that going to look? And what have they learned? I know, talking to clients, they've learned a lot, and they realize they've improved some efficiencies because they were forced into having to do it. And therefore they say, hey, we're going to carry these over. And, I think what will happen is they're going to be a lot more profitable, a lot more productive than they would have been if they hadn't gone through COVID.
Yeah, I think that's right, Eric. And I'm glad you brought up restaurants, because because of the pandemic, they've been forced into developing other revenue streams, particularly curbside pickup and takeaway and delivery. And they wouldn't probably have done that if it had been situation as normal. And I can see a lot of restaurants in particular carrying on those initiatives and at the same time as operating the businesses as usual.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a great example, isn't it, Kevin, of being adaptable in an ever-changing scenario and actually doing those things you've always wanted to do. COVID forced you to do it. So the question is, what else do you need to force yourself to do in a post-COVID world that maybe you're going to put off? Because I think there's two types of business coming out of post-COVID. So, and again, we'll answer, is it too soon to talk about that in a minute? And Kevin, I'm glad you brought up that it's common conversations you're having. But there's two types of business. There are those who are going to take the learnings it's forced you to have and keep doing them. And those who are going to yearn the past. They're going to long for some, that familiar duvet in your house. It's like staying away from home and you just wish you had your own blanket, your own pillow, and they're going to want a little bit of that comfort level back. I also think there's a huge part of that is a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
We've lived for the last however many decades where you say the change word, and what do people normally do?
Yeah, well, I think about it, from having been in the accounting world, technology changed our industry tremendously. I'd go back maybe 15, 20 years, and, and it's continued to progress. One of the things that I always think about is how we share documents with clients. It used to be they'd mail them, they'd walk in and bring you a pile of paperwork. Now that doesn't have to happen because of technology. You can securely upload documents. Everyone has the ability to scan. Even with their phone, you can do it on a phone with a scan app. So, technology is going to change. And I don't think because that technology changed that, I'm going to step back and let's get paper back into the office. That would be silly to do that because you gain some efficiencies with technology. So I think the same will apply with some of the things. And I think a lot of it's driven by technology, but the things that you tested and tried during COVID, I think some of those, you've learned that it's more efficient. I want to touch on one thing though, Dave, that we didn't touch on yet. And I think in this new world, I think we rushed into it. It's like last year, a year ago, probably today, everyone was told you need to stay home. And we quickly rushed and figured out a solution so people could work from home. But we really didn't do the work that probably needs to be done, which is what are the roles and responsibilities? What is the expectations of those people so that they can work anywhere? Kevin, you brought up this situation like an accounting office. Well, they have to be supervised and someone has to be looking over them. I don't necessarily agree going forward that it has to be that way, but I think there's work that has to be done before you're able to go to that kind of scenario. And it's hard work, but it's work that should be done. And so I think that now that we're kind of coming out of COVID, if people want to stay in that world of, working remotely, you just got to make sure that you have, I accountability set right, expectations clear, what what the person should be working on and accomplishing, so that you don't have to have that fear. There's not a need to be worried about, oh, people are just at home watching Netflix.
Right. No, I think there's some great points there, and I'll pick up on what you said, Eric, about technology. I think in the olden days, pre-COVID, the office was like a technology hub, and that was another good reason for going to the office.
Yeah.
Because that's where the fax machine was and the photocopier and whatever it might be. But the pace of technology has really outpaced all of that. And we as individuals are a much stronger technology hub than we ever used to be. So it does kind of erode the place of the office as the middle ground between the employee and the customer. Mm-hmm. And some people are going to question the relevance of that middle ground. Why do we really need to have it?
Yeah.
And if you think about big cities in particular, where, if I worked in Manhattan and I was faced with an 1.5-hour commute, each way every day from the suburbs, I would probably say working from home is a much more attractive option than anything else. Yeah. And it may well be that you'll find that, companies like WeWork, instead of being focused on the destination, i.e. an alternative office in Manhattan, maybe they'll go for smaller satellite offices more in the suburbs. For convenience, to give people an alternative to the home office.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's going to be, that's why I use that word hybrid. I think there's going to be a little bit of working from home, but also needing that social interaction, the meeting with clients where you go into an office. I just think what that means is there's going to be more shared space, more smaller offices. So, I'm envisioning if I still owned a firm, I'd probably cut my square footage in half and give people the option to rotate in and out and share their desk space so that they can get that environment away from home. Sometimes, for me, I love working at home, but I don't have little kids. I don't have those other distractions. But there's also that time where I need that social interaction. I want to be around other people, more so for, brainstorming and things like that. I think those kinds of work efforts are collaborative. It works much better when you're together and you got a whiteboard there that you're working with.
I think you've raised two fantastic concepts, and we've kept up this question, Eric, about rustling into working from home. Did we do it properly? Do we now need to do it properly? And also this cemented commentary from you, Kevin, around this common ground of technology was our reason. And I think these are really great call outs. I also like, and again, I'm repeating these in case you were listening, this idea that if you're a destination flexible office space, are you now more of a journey on the way to how that business functions? You change your purpose per se in that process. But it's throwing up loads of questions because the cloud has replaced the office hub, hasn't it? Cloud capacity, cloud capability, digital security. But I also want to link this back up to the questions from a moment ago. Do you know what your colleagues and team are thinking, feeling, experiencing? And are you close enough to it, or are you one step removed because you're fearful of that? Now, we've managed to ask George Powers to join us from Syracuse, who's right at the coalface. George, welcome. It's the day after tax, corporate deadline day, and here you are signing in against the clock to be with us. George, we're asking this question about, is it too soon to talk post-COVID? And from a client-serving perspective, I hope you would agree, it's never too soon to talk about a world without COVID, because COVID didn't wait for us, did it, to get ready for it?
It did not.
It just arrived. So at least we can take charge of coming out the other end, for want of a better expression. So one of the things that Kevin has raised is this is a time to engage with people like never before. How are you embracing the idea of remote working in the future? What's your view running a firm today? Has your view changed?
Since pre-COVID, has it changed? Yes,
yeah.
It has. I do believe that we've been moved at least 10 years, if not more, down the line of remote workers. We are no longer dealing in our industry, in particular the accounting industry, but I think in a number of industries, we're no longer dealing with a local group of talent or even with a local salary range, income range. We're now going national, not so much international yet, but certainly national, because I live 5 hours from New York City. But we're getting a lot of influx of folks moving to the Syracuse area from the New York City area. They just don't want to be in that environment anymore. And then the firms and companies in New York City are picking people up and they're working Syracuse, New York City, around the country, every place else, and they're paying them more than we had been paying folks in this area, but less than they were paying people from New York City. So they're getting a bargain. Our wage base is going up a little higher, and it's becoming more of a national trend, I think. So yes, in our industry, we're seeing it maybe more than some. But at the same time, if you're looking for people, you can't stay local anymore. If you have a type of job that can go national, you need to do it. It's just where we are now.
Yeah, I kind of monitor some job boards from time to time, and there's definitely been an increase in top jobs being posted that location isn't important. You know, none of the old-fashioned kind of relocation will be required because you've got to be in New York. It's a kind of live where you want. We don't care. Seen a lot of that, much more of that now.
Yeah, it does make it interesting and a change. I was going to say difficult, but actually just a change on how you supervise and pay these people, because some people are great at remote work and other folks are not so great at it. So it is changing the supervising and maybe how and what and different aspects of how you deal with this folks. But it very much is where it's not even a few years down the road. It's now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think one other thing I would add to that is that something you mentioned earlier, Dave, that the enlightened companies are revising their processes to take into account remote work. So what does remote work look like? What are the individual's responsibilities to meet that remote work requirement? And that's about reporting in and being productive and not watching Netflix and walking the dog whenever they want it. But equally, there's an emphasis on if you get the work done, we don't really care what you do.
Yeah, I think, some people, they work different hours. I mean, we think of 9 to 5 as traditional office hours, and that's when you open your office. But there may be some people that just are more productive and more engaged at different times of the day than 9 to 5. And so I think it's even better because they have that flexibility. And to your point, Kevin, as long as they're getting the job done, what's expected of them, and that has to be clear, but as long as they're getting it done, me as an owner of a business, I wouldn't care how they get it done, just as long as they get it done.
Yeah, I've got a preparer. She usually gets up at 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, to me, which is, all right, half the day's already done. She starts working sometimes at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and she'll work till midnight or sometimes even 2 o'clock in the morning. It's just, that's when her time works. It's okay, fine.
Yeah.
The downside is, of course, that Dolly Parton's going to have to rewrite the lyrics because 9 to 5 just isn't working.
That's a good shout, Kevin. Well, I think Dolly's probably the most gifted at writing a new song. So maybe we should put the request in, Kev.
12 working 12 to 12, I think.
I like the way that would ring, Kevin.
So, one of the things I'm asking today, is it time for a new leadership attitude? And I was sharing something with Kurt earlier on this afternoon, my time, about this book I've started listening to about being a fearless organization. And the context is tomorrow's organization, however big you are, needs to be a fearless place to work. And often you hear the word fearless and you're probably thinking about, adversity, strength, determination, pioneering. And actually, it's none of those things. It's a safe place.
Yeah.
And if you think about some of the attitudes we're discussing, you know, this 9 till 5 cliche, right? And particularly in the accounting industry, what I think is really difficult because, Kevin, you highlighted earlier, the office is this central hub of technology where it brought people into a place to get a process done. I think we've got to rethink the wheel a little bit because there isn't a need for somebody to stay with you just for that reason anymore. They can work for anybody and work from home, doing anything. I remember a few years ago, there was a real, and there still is, shortage of construction and civil engineers in the UK. So much so, some of my friends and one of my mentors, Richard Frost, was coming out of retirement to teach courses in Canada for BAE systems, right? Because the talent's not around. I hope there is now, right? But I think the accounting industry's got the same problem.
Yes.
You can't recruit easily at the moment. But if you're recruiting to an old mindset, to an audience that don't want that, how do you join the dots up? Is a question with no answer at this stage in time, because we've only got a 34-minute show.
Yeah. I mean, Dave, one thought I have is, I always fall back to the framework, the RLC framework. And when you talk about a new leadership attitude, I think you got to look at your cultural box and figure out, what is it that the culture of your company and what's it going to be going forward? I think that's the foundational work you got to do right now. And then also, what are some of the values that are important to you and your business? And this is, like Kevin said, you got to do it collaboratively. You have to have your team involved so that they're a part of it. I'm going through this right now with one of my clients, and that's the discussions we're having about culture. How does that play in this kind of new world?
And I think it's an interesting challenge on that. How do you deal with culture with remote employees? There is a culture, but how do you help define it? Yeah, I think you need to.
I absolutely agree, and it's taking culture to a new way of thinking. I'll share with you. Hopefully next week, Kurt can come and tell us about something he's doing, which is taking culture into a new way of doing things. It's just so easy, and I'd rather him tell you because it's cool what he's done with it already. But it's how do you link culture and technology together? Because you can.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's doing things that you've always done that work, but doing them with technology. In the same way, you hope that accounting write-up processes will soon, and I say soon, there's no timescale attached to this, if anyone's watching, will automatically be correct. How nice would that be, Gio?
It'd be interesting.
It would, wouldn't it? So the skill of reviewing becomes more valuable than the skill of entering in data, right? And then reviewing. So hopefully you can provide better value. I was having a conversation last week about, do accountants, and I'm not just accountants, tax experts, financial specialists, do they really understand the value of their time? Do clients really understand the immense value in their time? Especially when we were talking about, and I won't ask anybody around this table because the numbers clearly wouldn't be big enough because of their ages. That George, you've only done a few years in the tax industry, haven't you? Not many.
Not many.
Not many at all. Of course, everyone who's only listening to this, that's clearly not true, just in case you're wondering. It's an inside joke. But if you take all of George's tax seasons, times the amount of weeks and hours he's done, do clients really get that's the experience you're buying, as opposed to the service that could be an element of transactional about it? Whereas your advice is the wisdom, isn't it? Not just the process you're doing.
Yeah.
So coming back to this new attitude of leadership, I love your framework suggestion, because you're absolutely right. This is the time coming out of tax season to review your framework and its relevance in this perceived new world. Let's ask a question I put up earlier on. Is it true, or do you think COVID has eliminated or diluted the fear of change? Because everyone's forced to change at the minute. Every week. There's no letting up. I was punching the air earlier on, foolishly, about in Scotland, there's a date in the sand now that says we'll be allowed to leave and enter the country soon legally. You know, at what point did that become the best news of the day?
Yeah, good point.
So
I think eliminated is a very strong word, so I think to me the answer is self-evident that no, it has not eliminated the fear of change, but I think it definitely has detuned the fear of change because we've gone through so much involuntary change, and actually we're all fine. You know, we're all well, I didn't think that was going to work, but it has.
Yeah.
And so I think it's detuned that fear of change, and I think there is no more better time for people to face the future with a kind of bit of a blank sheet of paper in front of them, and as Eric said, kind of revisit your framework or develop a framework and build in some of these new elements of home working and flexibility and stuff like that, which are almost inevitably going to be the consequences of a post-pandemic world.
And actually be open to, right? Let's say you know, I always remember, Kevin, I don't know whether it's salaried or contracted or which one it was, but there was a point in my career, in my corporate days, where the rules changed, where your expectation was get the job done. And it was get the job done if that means 80 hours, or get the job done if that means it's 30 hours. It was your skill that made the difference.
Yeah, I can remember an apocryphal story when I worked at Ford Motor Company in the UK, where it was slightly before my time, but the MD of the company would wait at the bottom of the escalators and put you on a report if you checked in after 9 o'clock in an office environment, not in a manufacturing facility.
Yeah.
And if you think about it now, you think, well, that's ridiculous behavior. You know, so what? He comes in at 9:30, but stays till 8. You know, as long as the job is done, it's not just being at the job, it's doing the job that counts.
There is a flip side, though, and that's a fantastic example, Kevin. So there's a flip side that there's an agreement here somewhere, isn't there, that flexible working in exchange for a set of standards or results that are delivered within those boundaries. So this is not flexible at all costs. This is, of course, if you want to work, like George said, midday, 11 o'clock till midnight, that's up to you. If the boundaries of what you're asking that person to do are being met and delivered. And I think there's an exchange here, isn't there? There's an agreement to be reached that I get this because I do that, you know. And it's appreciating it's work for money, not necessarily time for money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would bring in actually the very important thing about human nature. I know a company who has informally kind of straw polled their employees about what they would like to do, and it seems to be a truism in that specific instance that the high performers are happy to be in the office. They value the social and management network there. They want to be seen to be shining, so they're looking for plaudits for their performance. But the opposite of true of non-performers. They are more happy to work from home because they can get rid of some of the supervision stuff. So that's me being a doubting Danny, I know, but it's important to put it into the calculation.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent point, Kevin. It's not a be-all, end-all. I mean, we're developing new management styles for these things. It's not like, okay, we're going to send everybody home, because we all know you send everybody home and a good chunk of people won't do their work. You know, they'll go take the dog out or do this. And in today's environment with kids at home, I don't know how most people get work from home done anyways, unless you are planning for it and set up for it. But it does create a new some new opportunities, but some new management skills that we need to bring about and to deal with it. And the younger folks are looking for this. They're expecting change. So we've got to kind of move with the times, I guess. This COVID has pushed us down and sped things up a little bit, but it also has focused on and helped us to see what needs to be addressed.
Marvelous point. It's a marvelous point. The other things that we were talking about, and is it too soon to talk about post-COVID, is also the impact, and we've alluded to it a bit in different marketplaces as well, haven't we? So restaurants is one. You know, I've been amazed in the UK how construction has ploughed through this. And I'm not quite sure has it been the same in the States, Eric?
Yeah, I think so. I think construction's still going on. That was one of the protected industries that was, still going.
So there are lots of examples out there, aren't there, of how you can adapt and carry on. But let's go right the way back to something Kevin said about 14 minutes ago. Kevin is instantly going to remember if you're watching. And here, that's right. This is the time. This is the time for your best people engagement like no other time. We're not talking about reports and profiling or digital surveys of where you fill in forms. We're talking about absolute engagement where you sit down and you have a conversation and you ask the one and only question. I think it's my favorite question of 2020. And it was said by David Morrison from one of the financial advisory companies that are in Denver. And David Morrison said, "Are you okay?" And then he asked, Prosperian Financial was the company. And he then said, imagine I was asking you, George, are you okay? And we have that chat. And then I go, are you going to be okay? Imagine asking a client that. Imagine asking a family member that. Someone you care about, let alone, more importantly here, a colleague, a team member. And I think there's a perspective. We used to coach this years ago about standing shoulder to shoulder as a mindset. But it's 100% this. I'm on your shoulder. I'm not behind you. I'm on your shoulder right here, side by side, facing what you're facing, even if, and here's the tricky bit, I don't like it myself. I'm not sure I'm comfortable myself. I might be as terrified as you. I might not even believe you because I don't understand or I've never experienced what it is you're going through in the way that you are, right? But regardless of all of that, I'm going to stand beside you and we're going to work this out. That's a new way of thinking. That's what Kevin was talking about, I think, earlier, about real people engagement, real old-fashioned conversations are actually, Kevin, I think you said, it's more human than ever before. Are you all right? As well as, how are you doing and all the performance stuff that goes on. So I think it is time to start to think about what is it going to take? And if you're running a firm, let's talk to them for a few moments. George and I have been talking about this quite intensely. The future you've always said you want to build, the structure you always want to have. Do you know what? When the timing is right in the accounting industry, and we're talking to that audience just for a moment, this could be relevant to any business. After tax deadline in April, once you've recharged yourself and taken time out, come back and let's rush into building the structure that's going to give you the balance that you've been desiring for the last decade, and let's get it done. Would that be true, George?
They're 100% true. Yes, 100%. So we got to get it done and get into a better place.
1,000%. And I think anyone could apply that, couldn't they, Eric?
Oh yeah.
So let's come back to this question. We'll go to Kevin first. Kevin, in this post-COVID conversations, is there anything else you would add today?
Well, I think we've covered the main things. I would pick up on the point you just made, Dave. This is the time. I know that's where we started the whole conversation. Is it too soon? But the real answer is it's never too soon. And this is the time, because there's a new world emerging, which is going to be some sort of hybrid, but it's going to be changed. And if you go into that unprepared, your business is at risk. So this is the time.
I got a bit of news for you there, Kevin. I was capturing the banner to put it up on the screen, and I typed in COVID. And what's really interesting, when the Grammarly spell checker clocked I'd done a typo, it didn't understand COVID with an E and was giving me other really great words instead. So here's the good news. Grammarly is not accepting COVID. So there's hope for tomorrow, because Grammarly, which is a tremendous app for self-spelling, which you put into your browser and so on. And it's really given us a clue there about optimistic future thinking, isn't it? Because it said, no, you can't write that word. So post-COVID preparation, this is the time. Anything else you'd like to add as well, George?
I do think that change does give us a tremendous opportunity, because it allows us to examine the status quo that may have just been going on. And you sometimes, things, you put one foot in front of the other, and sometimes you don't always think that maybe you're not going in the right direction. And so that change has given us an opportunity to look at things differently, to say, okay, what should we be doing differently? It's pushed some people out of business, and they were tired, time to get out. That needed to be done probably as well. It's not always nice, but sometimes these things are necessary. So I do think it is, I guess, an analogy that I gave one time before. It's kind of like you've got an apple cart and you lost a wheel. Your apples are all over the ground already. You might as well just change your apple cart to something that's going to work better for you before you reload it back on. And I think that's the opportunity this has given us, an opportunity to look at things differently to make a better cart.
And that is why George doesn't sell apples. Cheers to George.
That's true. Proves too many.
Correct. And Eric, over to you, my friend. What about this post-COVID preparation? This is the time. Anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah, the only thing I'd say is I agree with Kevin that if you don't change, and this has happened throughout society for years and years, if you don't change and you're not constantly looking at ways to improve, you're not going to survive. You're not going to be relevant. And I think that's what's important. What do we learn over this last 12 months that you can implement to make you more relevant? I've had this conversation with clients because in the restaurant industry, for sure, there's a lot of people that aren't going to make it through, and you need to be prepared for, the onslaught of extra business. And I've talked to people about making sure you have capacity and that you have efficiencies so that you can handle the additional demand, because there's a lot of pent up demand. And that's not just in the restaurant industry. I'm talking in a lot of industries. And so I think you need to be prepared for that.
Yeah, good point.
I think it's a fabulous message, and I'm going to put up something that we can all see on the back of that. I think will encompass the spirit of this conversation today. Your learning, your commitment to learning will separate you and your business in the future. It is one of the most important things you can do.
Yep.
I was watching and listening to many books last week, but I was watching a podcast. I must seek it out. And I've been following, as Kevin said last week, quite a bit of the All Blacks success period to see what they did, because nobody else has really kicked on since they did what they did. So I'm looking into some of the secrets that are in there. And one of the things that they had under their leadership in the first World Cup, when not in the past, but in the noughties, and then the second one straight afterwards, so 2011 and 2015, there was an absolute expectation that learning was part of every day and it was not a choice. And I think if you're running a business today or leading a team or want to lead a team or have ambitions in your career, I think this is someone we've got to get our head around, because the people coming through, the younger generations, are actually okay with this, believe it or not. So they will assess you if you're not doing it. And I've got to tell you, what can go wrong with absorbing information? Other than, of course, you can debate the application of it, Kevin and Eric, can't you, all day long? But what can be wrong about absorbing information to enhance the subconscious richness of your ability?
Yeah.
What can you lose? So the final message today, on top of all of this post-COVID preparation, is commit yourself to learning and see it through. You might just find the answer you're looking for. This has been Consultivation. We've been talking about the importance of post-COVID preparation, the need for a brand new leadership attitude, a time for new management techniques, mindsets, and ideas, and getting this timing absolutely right, because post-COVID preparation, it's going to become something we learn to live with if it isn't already, and that's imminent. So how do we adapt our work practices to be fit enough to operate in a new world? And how do you do the things in your company you've been always meaning to do tomorrow? Not in the future, tomorrow.
Yeah.
So you've been listening to Eric Swick from Swick Business Strategies. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. I will not be here next week. I will be sunning in Mexico.
In Mexico.
That's for you.
Yeah. So we're all very jealous, aren't we, Kevin?
Yeah.
Although Kevin has sun in Los Angeles all the time. So he's like, what's
all the time?
All the time. So thank you, Kevin, for all your time, and George Powers for joining us live to talk about the importance of being adaptable in this new period of our working history. You've been listening to Consultivations. I've been Dave Evans.